Amara Bennett's hand slipped from the edge of the dining table, and her body crumpled to the floor like a marionette with severed strings. The sound of her collapse, a soft thud followed by the scatter of pencils rolling across hardwood, shattered the quiet of the small Crown Point apartment. 6-year-old Zuri looked up from her coloring book, purple crayon frozen mid-stroke. For 3 heartbeats, she stared at her mother's motionless form, waiting for her to laugh, to move, to say it was just a game. But Amara didn't move. Her eyes were closed, her face pale against the worn rug, one arm twisted beneath her body. Zuri's crayon hit the floor. She scrambled to her mother's side on hands and knees, her princess pajamas catching on the corner of the coffee table. Her small hands grabbed Amara's shoulder and shook. "Mommy? Mommy, wake up!" Her voice cracked, rising into something between a plea and a scream. "Please wake up!" Amara's chest rose and fell, shallow breaths, barely visible, but her eyes remained closed. Zuri pressed her ear to her mother's chest the way she'd seen in movies, listening for the heartbeat. It was there, faint but steady, and that single sound kept her from dissolving into complete panic. She remembered what her mother had taught her during their safety talks, the ones Amara insisted on whenever Zuri complained about being bored. "If something happens to me, baby, you call 911. You tell them our address. You unlock the door when they knock. Can you remember that?" Zuri could remember. She had to remember. She ran to the kitchen counter where her mother's phone sat next to a half-empty coffee cup and scattered UX design sketches. Her hands trembled as she grabbed it, nearly dropping it twice. The screen lit up with a photo of the two of them at Coney Island last summer, both laughing, both happy, both fine. She swiped up, and her finger hovered over the emergency call button. But in her panic, she tapped the wrong icon, the recent calls list. Her small finger jabbed at the first number, not reading it, not checking it, just needing someone, anyone, to help. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a man's voice answered, crisp and controlled. "This is Park." Zuri's breath hitched. This didn't sound like the 911 operators from the safety videos at school. But he was an adult, and adults could help, and that was all that mattered right now. Hello." Her voice came out smaller than she intended, barely more than a whisper. She forced herself to speak louder. My mommy fell down. She's sleeping and won't wake up." There was a pause on the other end, a moment of absolute silence that felt like forever. Then the man's voice returned, completely transformed. Where it had been sharp and businesslike before, it now carried a gentle warmth that wrapped around Zuri like a blanket. "Hello. I'm listening. Can you tell me your name?" "Zuri. Zuri Bennett." I tried to call 911, but she looked back at her mother, still motionless on the floor, and her words tumbled out faster. "She just fell and she won't wake up, and I don't know what to do, and I'm scared." "Zuri, listen to me." The man's voice cut through her panic with calm authority. "You did exactly right by calling. You're very, very brave. I need you to stay calm for me, okay? Can you do that?" Zuri nodded, then remembered he couldn't see her. "Okay, good. Now, is your mother breathing? Can you check for me?" Zuri knelt beside Amara again, putting her small hand near her mother's mouth the way she'd done before. She felt the faint whisper of air against her palm. "Yes, I think so. Her eyes won't open." "That's good, Zuri. That's very good. You're doing perfectly." The man's voice remained steady, anchoring her. "Now I need you to tell me where you live." "Can you do that?" Zuri recited the address her mother had made her memorize, proud that she remembered every single number and letter. 1247 Crown Point Avenue. Apartment 3B. Queens. Excellent. "Is your door locked?" "Yes. Mommy always locks it at night." "That's very smart of your mother." "Zuri, I want you to listen carefully. I'm sending help to you right now. Very good doctors who are going to take care of your mother. They'll be there in just a few minutes. But I need you to stay on the phone with me until they arrive. Can you do that?" "Okay." Zuri's voice was small again, but steadier now. Having the stranger's calm voice in her ear made the apartment feel less empty, less terrifying. "While we wait, why don't you tell me about yourself? What's your favorite color?" The question caught her off guard. "Purple. Purple is an excellent choice. Very regal. Do you like princesses?" "Yes. I like Tiana the best because she works hard and she's smart, and she doesn't need a prince to save her. For the first time, Zuri heard something that might have been a smile in the man's voice. That sounds like a very good princess to admire. What else do you like? As Zuri talked about her favorite books and her best friend Maya from school and the art project she was working on, she kept one hand on her mother's arm, feeling the warmth of her skin, the proof that she was still there, still alive. The man on the phone asked questions, made small comments, kept her talking, kept her from falling apart. She had no idea who this man was or why he'd answered instead of 911. She didn't know that 15 blocks away in a gleaming Manhattan high-rise, Min Jae Park had just done something he hadn't done in his entire career. He'd walked out of a board meeting without explanation, leaving 8 investors staring at his empty chair while he stood at a floor-to-ceiling window, phone pressed to his ear, talking to a terrified 6-year-old about Disney princesses. Min Jae's other hand flew across his tablet with practiced precision, pulling up building schematics, dispatch protocols, medical team locations. His assistant, Jennifer, appeared at his side with wide eyes, and he rattled off commands in a low, urgent voice that didn't interrupt his conversation with Zuri. Activate Falcon Response Unit. Priority 0. 1247, Crown Point Avenue, Apartment 3B. Adult female, collapsed. Child reports breathing, but unresponsive. I want ETA in 7 minutes or less. Go. Jennifer didn't question it. She'd worked for Min Jae Park for 5 years and had never seen this expression on his face, something raw and human beneath his usual mask of control. She ran. Zuri. Min Jae returned his full attention to the phone, his voice soft again. The doctors are on their way. They're in a black van with a medical symbol on the side. When they knock, I need you to unlock the door and let them in. Can you do that for me? Yes. You're doing so well. Your mother is very lucky to have such a brave daughter. Zuri's eyes filled with tears. Will she be okay? Min Jae closed his eyes briefly. He never made promises he couldn't keep. It was a fundamental principle of his entire existence. But right now, in this moment, he found himself saying the doctors are the best in the city. They're going to take very good care of her. It wasn't quite a promise, but it was as close as he could get. 5 minutes later, Zuri heard the heavy footsteps in the hallway, followed by a firm knock. Medical team, we're here to help. They're here, Zuri whispered into the phone. Good. Go let them in. I'll stay on the line. Zuri ran to the door, standing on her tiptoes to work the deadbolt her mother had installed last year. The door swung open to reveal 4 people in black tactical gear with medical bags, their faces kind despite the urgent efficiency of their movements. The lead medic, a woman with kind eyes and dark hair, pulled back in a tight bun, immediately knelt to Zuri's level. Hi, sweetheart. You did great calling for help. Can you show us where your mom is? Zuri led them to Amara, still clutching the phone. The team swarmed around her mother with controlled precision, checking vitals, starting in 4-line, asking questions Zuri didn't fully understand. BP is 85/60. Pulse weak, but steady. Severe dehydration, looks like exhaustion-induced syncope. Starting fluids. Get her on O2. Looks like she's been working herself to death. One medic glanced at the dining table covered in design sketches and 3 empty coffee cups. Classic freelancer crash. The lead medic spoke into her radio. Falcon Command, patient is stable for transport. Proceeding to Horizon Pavilion. Then she turned back to Zuri with a gentle smile. Your mom is going to be okay, honey. We're going to take her to the hospital now, and you're coming with us. Is there anyone else here with you? Zuri shook her head, then remembered the phone. There's a man. He told me to call. He's still on the phone. The medic took the phone carefully. This is Falcon Unit 1. Who am I speaking with? Dr. Chun, this is Min Jae Park. I activated the response. How is the patient? The medic's eyes widened slightly. Mr. Park, patient is stable, dehydrated, likely syncope from exhaustion. We're transporting to Horizon Pavilion now. The child is unharmed but frightened. Good. Keep me updated. And Chun, take care of that little girl. She's incredibly brave. Yes, sir. The medic handed the phone back to Zuri. He wants to talk to you. Zuri pressed the phone to her ear. Hello. Zuri, the doctors are going to take you and your mother to the hospital now. You're going to ride in their van. It might seem scary, but I promise you're safe. They're going to make your mother better. Will I see you? The question came out before Zuri could stop it. There was a pause. Yes. I'll come check on you both. I promise. It was the second promise Min Jae Park had made that night, and he found he meant this one even more than the first. The Horizon Pavilion at St. Gabriel Medical Center existed in a different universe than the rest of the hospital. Where the main floors bustled with noise and harsh fluorescent lighting, the pavilion was quiet, softly lit, more like a boutique hotel than a medical facility. Each suite had warm wooden accents, comfortable furniture, and windows that actually opened. Amara awoke slowly, her mind swimming up through layers of fog. Her mouth tasted like cotton, and there was a dull ache behind her eyes. Memory returned in fragments, working late, feeling dizzy, the floor rushing up to meet her, and then nothing. Zuri. Where was Zuri? Amara's eyes snapped open, and she tried to sit up, but her body felt weighted down. She was in a bed, not her bed, in a room that definitely wasn't her apartment. Medical equipment beeped softly nearby, and in 4-line ran from her arm to a bag of clear fluid. Mommy! Zuri's voice cut through the confusion. Amara turned her head to see her daughter sitting in an armchair nearby, still in her princess pajamas. Zuri scrambled out of the chair and ran to the bed, and Amara gathered her close with the arm that wasn't connected to N4, breathing in the familiar scent of her daughter's coconut shampoo. Baby, are you okay? What happened? Where are we? The questions tumbled out as Amara ran her free hand over Zuri's face, her arms, checking for injuries, for anything wrong. I'm okay, Mommy. You fell down and wouldn't wake up, and I got really scared. I tried to call 911, but I called the wrong number, but the man was really nice, and he sent doctors, and they brought us here, and they said you're going to be okay. Amara tried to process this through the lingering fog in her brain. Wrong number? What man? What doctors? She looked around the room again, taking in details she'd missed before. The quality of everything, the obvious expense, the private suite setup. Zuri, where exactly are we? A soft knock interrupted before Zuri could answer. The door opened, and a man entered, Korean, probably late 30s, dressed in a modest gray overcoat despite the obvious quality of the fabric. His face was composed, almost expressionless, but something in his eyes suggested depths of carefully controlled emotion. He stopped just inside the doorway and bowed his head slightly, a gesture that seemed both natural and formal. Ms. Bennett, I apologize for the intrusion. My name is Min Jae Park. Amara stared at him, her tired mind struggling to place the name, to understand why this clearly important man was standing in her hospital room in the middle of the night. Min Jae seemed to recognize her confusion. He moved a few steps closer, his hands clasped in front of him, his posture suggesting both power and an odd sort of humility. There was an error in a system I manage. A legacy crisis line from an old prototype that was never properly decommissioned. When your daughter attempted to call 911, the call was rerouted to this line, which connected to my personal emergency phone. I sent my medical response team and had you brought here to St. Gabriel Medical Center to a wing that my company maintains. He paused, letting her absorb this, then continued. The doctors tell me you collapsed from severe dehydration and exhaustion. You've been working too much, eating too little, sleeping even less. Your body simply gave out. Amara felt heat rise to her cheeks. Being lectured about self-care by a stranger, even one who'd apparently saved her life, stung her pride. I'm a single mother and a freelance designer. I work when I can work. I don't exactly have the luxury of... I'm not criticizing you. Min Jae's voice softened, cutting through her defensiveness. I'm stating facts, and I'm explaining why you're here instead of in a standard emergency room. You needed immediate care. My team provided it. There will be no bill, no insurance claims, no paperwork. Consider it an apology for the system error that caused your daughter's call to reach me instead of emergency services. Amara opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at Zuri, who was watching this exchange with bright, curious eyes. He's Mr. J, Zuri offered helpfully. He talked to me on the phone when you fell. He made me not be scared anymore. He asked me about princesses and my favorite color, and he told me the doctors were coming, and he said I was brave. Something in Amara's chest cracked open at her daughter's words, at the obvious trust in her voice when she talked about this stranger. She looked back at Min-jae Park and saw him in a different light. Not just the powerful CEO, but the man who had talked a terrified 6-year-old through the worst moment of her young life. "Thank you," Amara said quietly. The words felt inadequate, too small for what he'd done, but they were all she had. I can't even imagine what would have happened if Zuri hadn't reached you. If you hadn't answered. If you hadn't cared enough to send help." Min-jae's carefully controlled expression shifted, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "I've built my career on responding to crises with precision and logic, but I've never received a call quite like Zuri's. She was terrified but trying so hard to be brave. I could not help." He glanced at Zuri with something that might have been fondness. "Your daughter is remarkable, Ms. Bennett." "Amara, please." She managed a weak smile. "Anyone who saves my life gets to use my first name." "Amara." He tested the name, his accent giving it a slightly different musicality. "And you may call me Min-jae." Zuri looked between them with a 6-year-old's unfiltered assessment. "Are you going to be friends now?" Both adults paused, caught off guard by the directness of the question. Then, simultaneously, they both laughed, Min-jae's a quiet exhalation of amusement, Amara's more open despite her exhaustion. "I think that might be nice," Amara said, looking at Min-jae with genuine curiosity now. "Though I have to admit, I have no idea what a CEO does with his time when he's not rescuing collapsing designers and their daughters. Would you like to know?" The question came out before Min-jae seemed to fully consider it, surprising himself as much as her. Amara blinked. "Are you asking me out while I'm in a hospital bed with an in my arm?" "No. I'm asking if you'd allow me to take you and Zuri to dinner tomorrow evening. As a proper apology for the fear you both experienced tonight, and as..." He hesitated, searching for words. "As an opportunity to ensure you're fully recovered." It was possibly the most awkward dinner invitation Amara had ever received, delivered with the emotional cadence of a business proposal. But something about his earnestness, the way he included Zuri without hesitation, the fact that he clearly had no idea how to navigate this social situation despite running a billion-dollar company. It was endearing. "Okay," Amara heard herself say. "Yes, dinner." Zuri clapped her hands. "Can we get pizza?" Min-jae looked momentarily alarmed, as if pizza hadn't factored into his calculations. Then he nodded seriously. "If that's what you'd like, then pizza it is." The next evening, Amara stood outside an Italian restaurant in Manhattan that specialized in wood-fired artisan pizza, while somehow also being the kind of place that probably required reservations weeks in advance. Min-jae had somehow found the perfect middle ground between Zuri's 6-year-old tastes and adult sophistication. He was waiting outside, dressed more casually than yesterday. Dark jeans, a navy sweater, but still with that careful attention to detail that marked everything he did. When he saw them approaching, something in his expression lightened. "You look well," he said to Amara, and it sounded like he genuinely meant it, like her health was something that mattered to him personally. "I slept for 14 hours and drank enough water to fill a swimming pool," Amara replied. "Doctor's orders, apparently." "Good. You needed it." Inside, they were led to a corner booth that offered both comfort and privacy. Zuri immediately claimed the spot by the window, so she could watch the street, and Amara found herself sitting across from Min-jae, suddenly aware of how strange this situation was. 2 days ago, this man had been a complete stranger. Now here they were, sharing pizza like old friends. "So," Amara said after they'd ordered, "how does someone end up running a billion-dollar AI logistics company? That seems like a very specific career path." Min-jae considered the question with the same seriousness he seemed to apply to everything. Obsession, primarily, and a complete inability to connect with other human beings in a meaningful way. Amara nearly choked on her water. "That's surprisingly self-aware. I have an excellent therapist." He said it without irony, without shame. She tells me I use work as a substitute for genuine human connection and that my emotional intelligence is severely underdeveloped despite my intellectual capabilities. And what do you tell her? That she's absolutely right, and then I go back to my office and work 18-hour days. He paused, though lately she's been encouraging me to examine why I find that acceptable. Amara studied him across the table. There was something refreshing about his honesty, the way he didn't try to dress up his flaws or pretend to be something he wasn't. I'm a UX designer. Freelance. Which is a fancy way of saying I work alone in my apartment in my pajamas and forget to eat or sleep or exist as a human being. Hence the collapse. Hence the collapse, she agreed ruefully. I kept telling myself I just needed to finish one more project, land one more client, build up a little more savings. But apparently my body had other plans. Your body was protecting you. You pushed it past its limits, says the man who works 18-hour days. Exactly. I'm warning you based on personal experience. Min Jae's lips quirked into something that might have been a smile. My therapist would call this projection. Your therapist sounds very wise. She is. You'd like her. Zuri, who had been coloring on the kids' menu, suddenly looked up. Mr. J, do you have kids? The question landed in the space between them with unexpected weight. Min Jae's expression shifted, something vulnerable and almost painful crossing his face before he controlled it. No, I don't. His voice was quiet. I haven't spoken to a child in over 15 years. Not until I answered your call. Why not? Zuri asked with a child's innocent directness. Because I built a life that didn't include space for children or families or really anything beyond work. He looked at Zuri with complete honesty. And now I'm 38 years old and realizing that might have been a mistake. That's sad, Zuri said simply. Yes, Min Jae agreed. It is. Amara felt her throat tighten. She reached across the table, not quite touching his hand, but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her presence. Well, now you met Zuri, so that streak is broken. Min Jae looked at her hand, so close to his, and then at her face. Yes, I suppose it is. The pizza arrived, saving them from the emotional intensity of the moment. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily. Min Jae asked about Amara's design work, and she found herself describing her process, her philosophy, the joy she found in creating interfaces that felt intuitive and human. He listened with genuine interest, asking questions that showed he understood the technical aspects while appreciating the creative ones. In turn, Amara asked about Horizon Kinetics, expecting corporate jargon and getting instead a passionate explanation of how AI could revolutionize supply chains, reduce waste, connect resources more efficiently. Min Jae talked about his work the way she talked about design, not as a job, but as a calling. You really love it, Amara observed. It's not just about the money or the success. You actually care about making systems work better. Is that strange? No, it's human. She smiled. Turns out you're better at connecting than you think. Zuri had fallen asleep against the window by the time they finished eating, full of pizza and exhausted from the excitement of the past 2 days. Min Jae insisted on calling his car to drive them home, and Amara was too tired to argue. The drive through nighttime Manhattan was quiet, peaceful. Zuri dozed in Amara's lap, while Min Jae sat across from them in the spacious town car, watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. I've been thinking, he said quietly, not wanting to wake Zuri, about what my therapist would say about this situation. What would she say? That I'm using this as another way to avoid dealing with my actual emotional issues. That I'm drawn to you and Zuri because you represent something I've never allowed myself to have, and I'm romanticizing it rather than doing the real work of changing. Amara raised an eyebrow. That's pretty specific. Is that what you think you're doing? I don't know. Min Jae looked out the window at the passing lights. But I know that when your daughter called me, something in my life shifted. Like a calculation that had been running in the background for years suddenly produced a result I didn't expect. You're both variables my system never accounted for. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? He turned back to her, and she saw something raw in his expression. I don't know yet, but it's interesting, and I haven't found anything interesting in a very long time. The The car pulled up outside Amara's building in Crown Point. Min-jae helped carry a sleeping Zuri upstairs, moving carefully through the narrow stairwell. At her apartment door, Amara shifted Zuri to one arm while digging for her keys. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything, for saving us, for dinner, for being surprisingly easy to talk to." Surprisingly? He looked almost offended, but she could see the humor in his eyes. "You're a billionaire CEO. You're supposed to be intimidating and distant and probably a little bit evil. Instead, you're just what? Human." She found her keys, started to unlock the door, then paused. "Min-jae, would you like to come in? Just for a few minutes? I should put Zuri to bed, but I'm not quite ready for tonight to end." He hesitated, clearly torn between what he wanted and what he thought was appropriate. "Are you sure?" "No, but I'm asking anyway." Inside, Amara carried Zuri to the small bedroom they shared, tucking her daughter under the covers with practiced ease. Zuri stirred just enough to mumble, "Love you, Mommy," before diving back into sleep. Amara stood there for a moment, watching her breathe, overwhelmed by how close she'd come to not being here for moments like this. When she came back out, Min-jae was standing in the middle of her small living room, looking completely out of place among the second-hand furniture and children's toys. He'd picked up one of Zuri's drawings from the coffee table, a picture of 3 stick figures labeled Mommy, Me, and Mr. J. "She drew this after we got home from the hospital," Amara said softly, before I could stop her. "Why would you stop her?" "Because I didn't want her to get attached to someone who's going to disappear from her life." Amara moved closer, her voice quiet but honest. "Min-jae, you've been amazing. You saved us. But you have a billion-dollar company to run, and we're just us. This isn't sustainable. What if I want it to be?" The question hung in the air between them. Amara searched his face, looking for uncertainty, for doubt, for any sign that he didn't mean it. She found none. "You don't even know us. Then let me get to know you." He set down the drawing carefully, as if it was precious. "I've spent 15 years building something impressive and empty. Maybe it's time I built something real instead. This isn't a business deal, Min-jae. You can't just optimize us into your life." "I know." He stepped closer, and she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "I'm terrible at this. I have no idea what I'm doing. But I know that when I look at you and Zuri, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Something that isn't about profit margins or efficiency metrics. Something human. And what's that? Hope." The word was barely a whisper, but it hit Amara like a wave. She looked up at him, this strange, brilliant, lonely man who had stumbled in her life through a technological error and a 6-year-old's panic, and saw past the CEO, past the wealth, past all the armor he wore. She saw someone just as scared and exhausted as she was, just trying to figure out how to be human. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "This is probably a terrible idea." "Probably," he agreed. "We barely know each other." "True, and you're emotionally unavailable with workaholic tendencies." "My therapist would agree with that assessment. And I'm a mess who literally collapsed from overwork 2 days ago." "Also accurate." Amara laughed, and the sound broke something open between them. "So what are we doing?" "I have no idea." Min-jae reached up, his hand hovering near her face, not quite touching, asking permission. "But I'd very much like to find out." She leaned into his touch, and his hand cupped her cheek with unexpected gentleness. For a moment they just stood there, breathing the same air, both terrified and exhilarated. Then Amara rose on her toes and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, both of them testing this new territory. But then Min-jae's other hand came up to frame her face, and Amara's hands fisted in his sweater, and the kiss deepened into something that felt like falling and flying at once. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Min-jae rested his forehead against hers. "That was," he started, "unplanned." Amara supplied. "I was going to say perfect." She laughed again, and he smiled, a real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "So what happens now?" she asked. "I don't know. I've never done this before. Never kissed someone, never wanted to stay." He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. "I always leave, Amara. I find reasons, excuses. I build walls and maintain distance. It's what I do. And now I'm terrified because I don't want to leave. I want to stay here in your tiny apartment with your sleeping daughter and your secondhand furniture and figure out how to be someone who stays." Amara felt tears prick her eyes. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. And it's completely impractical and probably impossible. I specialize in solving impossible problems. This isn't a logistics puzzle, Min Jae. No, it's much more important than that. He kissed her forehead gently, which is why I'm going to try anyway. They stood there for a long moment, holding each other, both knowing this was crazy and doing it anyway. Finally, Min Jae stepped back reluctantly. "I should go. It's late, and you need rest. Will I see you again?" The question felt vulnerable, too open, but Amara asked it anyway. "Yes, if you'll let me." He paused at the door. "I'd like to help with your workspace. Proper ergonomic setup, break reminders, hydration alerts. And before you argue, it's not because I think you can't take care of yourself. It's because I want you to be healthy and safe, and I happen to have resources that can help with that." "Okay, robot boss," Amara teased. "I'll make you a deal." He smiled. "I'll help with your workspace if you promise to call me when you're overworking. Keep me accountable to leave my office at reasonable hours." "That seems fair." "Also," he hesitated, then pushed forward, "I'd like to take Zuri to the Children's Museum this weekend, if you're both free. If that's not too weird." Amara felt her heart twist. "You want to spend your weekend with a 6-year-old at a children's museum?" "I've missed 15 years of knowing how to talk to children. I thought perhaps Zuri could teach me." He looked almost shy. "Unless that's overstepping." "No, I think Zuri would love that." Amara opened the door. "We both would." Min Jae left, and Amara closed the door behind him, leaning against it with a smile she couldn't suppress. She looked at Zuri's drawing still on the coffee table, 3 stick figures holding hands, and thought maybe, just maybe, her daughter had drawn the future. 2 weeks later, Min Jae sat in his office at Horizon Kinetics, leaving on time for once. His assistant Jennifer had nearly fainted when he'd announced he was keeping his weekends free going forward. On his phone was a message from Amara with a new drawing from Zuri, this one showing all 3 of them at the museum, surrounded by dinosaurs and stars. His computer pinged with a notification from the company's AI system, the same system that had originally routed Zuri's call to him through that forgotten legacy line. Unexpected emotional variable detected in user behavior patterns. Productivity, unchanged. Life satisfaction metrics, increased 340%. Recommendation, continue current trajectory. Min Jae stared at the message, then laughed, a real, full laugh that his employees in the outer office had never heard before. He typed a response into the system, knowing it was ridiculous to argue with an AI, but unable to resist. Recommendation accepted. Variable has been reclassified from unexpected to essential. His phone buzzed. "Amara, Zuri wants to know if you're coming for dinner. Fair warning, she insists on making spaghetti herself, which means you'll be eating mostly noodles and sauce with very little actual cooking involved." Min Jae smiled and typed back, "I'll be there in 20 minutes. For the first time in 15 years, Min Jae Park left his office early, not because of an emergency or a meeting or an obligation, but because a little girl wanted to make him spaghetti and a woman wanted him to stay. Sometimes the wrong number calls exactly the right person, and sometimes that's exactly how life is meant to work. If you enjoyed this story of unexpected connections and want to see more heartwarming tales like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next upload. Drop a comment below telling us what moment touched your heart the most. Was it Zuri's brave phone call, Min Jae's transformation, or that perfect first kiss? And if this story made you believe in fate and second chances, show some love by hitting that like button. Your support helps us bring more beautiful stories to life. Now, let's hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a wrong number change your life? Share your stories below.